Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jana Duval, and I am staff member at Northern College, and I have the privilege of being with you this evening. Dr. Lance Males, one of our organizers, noted today that it takes many generous community sponsors and agencies working together to make this happen, and we are very grateful for their contributions. Just a bit of housekeeping items. Could those attending in person please ensure that their cell phones are set to vibrate or airplane mode? And could those joining us online please ensure that you are muted? Please note that there will be a question and answer session at the end. Those attending in person will have the opportunity to come up to one of the mics or use the mic that we're passing around, or jot down with your questions and we will ask them for you. Those attending online can write it in the Q&A or the chat, and we will read them out for you. We apologize if we do not get to all the questions. I would like to start us off with the land acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territory of the Cree, Ojibwe, and Algonquin homelands. We acknowledge these ancestral lands and that we are gathered on, which continue to interconnect us all and remind us that we are all treaty people. First Nation communities now located on these lands include Matachewan, Temiskaming, Temagami, and Métis People Region Number 3. I would like to invite our campus elder, Grandmother Marilyn, and Carolyn Cloutier of the Nipissing Métis family, who are here to represent the First Nation community and are members of the Spirit Wind Singers of the North.
Habajo, Gishkate Kwe Nakaz Mangdodem. My spirit name is Moonlight Woman, and I'm Loon Clan. I'm an elder from Temiskaming First Nation, and it's an honor to be here tonight at such a special occasion with temple, and yeah, it's so beautiful. So we thought of a song that we want to sing, but right now I'm going to do an opening prayer. Oh, great spirits of all four directions, we ask that you look upon us this evening in a good way, in the best way we know how, Creator. Watch over us and keep an open mind, and that we get to understand what's happening in a good way, a safe way. And be with us, Creator, great spirits of all four directions. Miigwech. I'm going to sing the Eagle song, and that represents I can hear you, Ginodwa. I can see you, Giwagma. I can feel you, Ginichiwa. And I honor you, Ginikona. And Miigwech Eagle for being here to show us love and care and kindness. Miigwech. Way Miigwech. Always remember that eagle is following you. He sees what you do. Miigwech.
Thank you, thank you, Grandmother Marilyn and Carol. And now that our hearts and minds are open to new information, it's my pleasure to invite Doug Clark, who's the Dean of Sciences, Veterinarian Science, Mining, Instrumentation, and a list of other programs here at Northern College, to introduce our guest speaker.
Good evening. It's my great pleasure and privilege to introduce our guest speaker of honor, Dr. Temple Grandin, who will be speaking this evening on the topic, Great Minds Are Not All the Same. Oliver Sacks wrote in the foreword of Thinking in Pictures that Grandin's first book, Emergence, labeled Autistic, was unprecedented because there had never before been an inside narrative of autism. Dr. Grandin is a prominent professor, author, and speaker on both autism and animal behavior. Her unique insights have fueled her life's work to understand her own autistic mind and to educate others. Today, she's a professor of animal science at Colorado State University and was named one of the top 10 USA college professors for her work there, where she teaches graduate animal behavior and welfare. She has a successful career consulting on both livestock handling equipment, design, and animal welfare. Half of the cattle in the United States are handled in facilities that she's designed. She's been featured on National Public Radio, and a BBC special was called The Woman Who Thinks Like a Cow. She's also appeared on national TV shows such as Larry King Live, 2020, 60 Minutes, Fox and Friends, and she has a popular 2010 TED Talk. Articles about Dr. Grandin have appeared in Time Magazine, New York Times, Discovery Magazine, Forbes, and USA Today. HBO made an Emmy Award-winning movie about her life. In 2010, Time Magazine included her in its annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. She was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2016. As the number of children diagnosed with autism continues to rise internationally, Dr. Grandin is sharing her message about the disorder and differently abled brains with packed houses. At the heart of that message is this: rigid academic and social expectations could wind up stifling a mind that, while it might struggle to conjugate a verb, could one day take us to distant stars. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Temple Grandin.
Great to be here tonight. We've got lots of things to talk about, and might just start out telling a little bit about myself. I didn't have any speech till age 4, and I can't emphasize the importance of early intervention. I hope we've got some parents here tonight with real little kids, but it's very important to get them into good therapy by 3 years old. If you've got little kids that are not talking, you need to be doing something about it. And one of the problems with autism is you're going all the way from Einstein to somebody who may not be able to dress themselves. You've got this very, very big range, and it's all calls the same thing. But I'm going to be talking tonight about how we need the different kinds of thinkers with the different kinds of minds. I don't know if this is not working. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, is it working now? Nope, it's not working. Is it going to work now? Okay, maybe I'm going to have to just say, do I have to just say next slide? All right, should be able to work now. Okay, the thing is, We need the skills. We need the skills of the people that think differently. Now, the thing is, I didn't realize that I thought differently until I was in my late 30s. I think completely in pictures, and if you saw the HBO movie, it shows exactly how I think. That's real accurate. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's just go to the next slide. Okay, the first step is you have to realize that different kinds of thinking exist. That's the first step. I do a lot of talks to business leaders, and I said you got to realize that different kinds of thinking exist. That's the thing. Let's take a couple of pictures there, and then that should be it. Yep, that's it, because this is where I get very distracted with you walking around in the front. And I'm going to later on talk about tension shifting slowness. The problem is I can't shift my tension back fast enough. And so we can do all the pictures we want afterwards. That's just fine. But the thing is, I was shocked when I found out that other people thought verbally. I was in my 30s. Now, in my work with cattle, let's go to the next slide. Let's just go to the next slide. My work with cattle, being a visual thinker, really helped me, because animals live in a sensory-based world. They don't live in a word-based world. So the first thing I did was to look at what are cattle seeing when they went through the chutes. Because I'd noticed, well, there was a coat on the fence, they would stop. There was vehicles parked alongside the facility, they would stop. That's something I noticed. Other people didn't seem to notice that. And if you remove all these distractions, then they go through the facility a whole lot easier. Next slide, please. Yeah, all right, I wonder if this is going to work now. Let me point it this way and see if it works. Okay, I have to point it at the computer. Okay, that's what I'll do, then it will work. Now, this is at a handling facility that I saw over in the UK. Now, you see how you have a reflection right there at the entrance? Well, that won't be there 2 hours later. But when that's there, it's going to make the cattle stop. That's why you can get time of day changes and how cattle move. If you're inside a building, then you're likely not to have these problems. But when I first started out, this was radical stuff. People hadn't thought about this kind of stuff. Now, the thing about visual thinking is you can see a solution to a problem. You can also see a risk. And I had a chance to visit this launch pad about 6 years ago, and I found a raccoon in it. That's probably something you don't want in there, because they were using that base of the launch pad for making fueling equipment. I don't want Mr. Raccoon chewing on it, especially if you use soy-based wiring. They just love to chew soy-based wiring. Maybe environmentally good, but it's not rat and raccoon proof. They treat it as food. But you can also see maybe a solution to a problem too. You just see it. It's not abstract. Like, for example, if you have a little kid that's in class that's autistic and he's bored with the baby math, move him ahead and give him harder math to do. An object visualizer can see a risk, maybe see a solution to a problem. The mathematician will calculate a risk. And in my book, Visual Thinking, I use the example of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. They did a perfect job of calculations of making it earthquake-proof, but they did not make it waterproof. And it's a real bad idea when you live next to the sea, which is super important emergency cooling pump in a non-waterproof basement. They didn't see the water coming over the seawall and drowning the emergency cooling pump. I can't design a nuclear reactor, but you see how basic it is? That's the mistake that they made. It was that basic. It's a visual thinking mistake. How could you do that? There's three kinds of ways that people think. Now, I'm an object visualizer. Everything I think about is a picture. So object visualizers are very, very good with anything mechanical. I was talking to some people today. Their son could fix any motorcycle, any snowmobile. Well, that's going to be a good career. We don't have enough people fixing things right now. I'm finding broken elevators all over everywhere that are not getting serviced. Expired elevator inspection certificates all over everywhere. And we've got one escalator at the Denver airport that breaks so much that they never put the little fences away that they put around it. They just fold them up and they're leaning against the wall because they need to use them so often. So mechanical things, art, photography, working with animals, highly skilled trades. I'm going to push the mechanical stuff because I'm concerned about artificial intelligence on taking away a lot of the commercial art jobs. But it's not going to take away fixing motorcycles, fixing snowmobiles, fixing boats. Those things are not going to go away. You got a job for life with that. Now, the thing about the visual thinkers is they can't do higher math. But the other things that visual thinkers can do is kind of see relationships. You're the school of minds here. If you're a Dune fan, you're sitting on top of the spice right now. Cobalt, nickel, all of those things. You may start mining it again. Let's not strip mine it. We're going to need some very, very smart minds, probably on the autistic spectrum, to do these things. Yeah, putting 2 and 2 together here. Yep, the Dune story originally was basically based on all the oil wars, around the world. Now, an object visualizer made this beautiful little flower in welding class. This is the kind of mind I'd want for maintenance in the factory, because they could see the flower in a box full of parts. That's the creative kind of visual thinker. Then you have your spatial visualizer, your math kid. Now, I've been hearing some really bad things lately from the schools. Bad stuff like you have a kid in primary school, autistic, bored with little baby math, totally, absolutely bored, and they won't let him do the harder math. Then he turns into a behavior problem, and they label him pathological demand disorder. I think that's just rubbish. He needs to be moved ahead in math, because right now, we're concerned about staying ahead in computer chips. Well, there's only one way to stay ahead. That's to stay ahead. And you give that kid that math book, because he's the one that's going to help you to stay ahead. Half of Silicon Valley's got autism or Asperger's or whatever. We wouldn't have any computers. We wouldn't have any technicians, technical stuff, without some autism. No, you give that kid the math book. We're going to need his skills if we want to stay ahead. Now, right now, we're really worried about this one chip-making machine, the state-of-the-art. It'll be obsolete in 2 years. Everybody's having a fit now about the Mate 60 phone from China. It gets bad camera reviews on Amazon, but it can talk to satellites, and it has an advanced chip. They made it with the old equipment. Yeah. You got to just stay ahead. That's what you got to do. Then you have your verbal thinkers, writers, teachers, all kinds of verbal jobs. We need all the different kinds of minds. Now, this research shows that the object visualizer like me and the spatial visualizer, the mathematician who thinks in patterns, are very different kinds of thought. And the way they approach problem solving is very different. I tend to just put things together, maybe things that might not seem to have that much of a relationship, or see a solution to a problem. An algebra book taken out of the attic and given to that kid. It's on his desk. I just see it. Don't give me a reason why you can't give the kid that algebra book. For him, it's a door. For me, it's a doorstop. But we need our visual thinkers. Right now, let's look at places where we need visual thinking. We're all hot about biofuels. United Airlines is advertising how they're going to fly planes on garbage. Virgin Atlantic just flew a plane across the sea on 15% corn, and the rest of the fuel is pig fat. Okay, great. We can make airplane fuel out of pig fat. But the amount of pigs you had to slaughter for one transatlantic flight was ridiculous. See, the thing about biofuels is it's only sustainable up to a point. Right now, we're putting about 40% of the U.S. Corn supply into ethanol right now. Yeah, that's maybe 10% of our car fuel, maybe. Yeah, it's only sustainable up to a point. When you think about what are you going to feed it, I don't know how the chemists can make pig fat into Jet A airplane fuel. I don't know how they do that. That's magic to me. That's for the mathematicians. But I'm the one who goes, what do we feed that magic box the chemists made? The commodities. You can have algae making materials to make skis out of, and snowboards out of, and polo shirts out of, but you have to feed the algae sugar, and that has to be grown. And then down in Brazil, they're growing sugarcane to feed the power plants. kilometers after kilometers after kilometers of sugarcane. There's a point where that won't be sustainable. How about next generation nuclear? Let's go back to Fukushima. You put the pump in a non-waterproof basement. How could you do that? And then on Chernobyl, they built a naked reactor with no concrete containment building. You've got to be kidding. It's just made out of concrete and steel, and a lot of it. And people can be mixtures of the different kinds of thinking. Now, it turns out that I've got a huge amount of visual thinking circuits in my head. That was a mind blower, seeing this. And an object visualizer will just want to look and see how something works. The verbal thinker wants to read about it. The mathematician tends to want to read about it and look at it, likes to do both. So let's look at how different kinds of students go about designing a planet. A really interesting paper. The art students, they were working in teams. They made fantastic planets with all kinds of polar bears and palm trees and crystals and all kinds of crazy stuff. The science students, the mathematicians, they just draw a circle and tell you about the gravity and the atmosphere, very little pictures. And the word thinkers, they painted some splotches. But you know what was shocking about verbal thinkers? No planning. Verbal thinkers get big top-down ideas. But how do you actually implement them? How do you do it? Let's think about making a classroom or a workplace more inclusive of people on the autism spectrum. I can tell you some things to do. You got to get rid of bullying. The other thing is, I don't have any working memory. So any task that involves a sequence, I need a pilot's checklist. Let's say in a chemistry lab to do the experiment. Put it out in a checklist format. I need an external working memory. And then some individuals can see flicker on LED lights. Well, I need to find LED lights that don't flicker. Okay, so that's 3 specific things I can do to help make a workplace or a classroom, more inclusive. And we need these minds. I've gone into tech companies where they had all the lights in the office turned off, or another tech company, there were rows of people at computers, all silent, with a giant picture window looking out onto the mountains. They didn't need any artificial light. That solved the problem with the flicker. Verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize, but they're much more organized in their thinking. My mind tends to kind of move around and associate things. Yes, I watched an old James Bond movie on the plane yesterday, 1985, about the chip wars. The villain was going to flood Silicon Valley with fracking the ocean. They didn't call it fracking back then. This movie was made when laptops didn't exist, when flat screens didn't exist. Yes, the chip wars. We're in them right now. I have a prophecy. They would have planned that movie very, very early 80s. Oh, computers were primitive back then. Okay, let's look at the early inventors. They were all object visualizers. It was all mechanical equipment. All the early inventions in the patent office were all mechanical things. A blacksmith that made a grain harvesting machine. Airplanes were made by the Wright brothers. They were bicycle mechanics. All mechanical stuff. But we've got a problem today. There's things we're not making today because the kids that should be making it are playing video games in the basement when they should be out figuring out how to solve some of these problems. Yes, we have the spice under the ground here, and this is Spice Central right here if you're a Dune fan. And we got to figure out how to get it out without wrecking the environment. Because you know what I thought about in the 5-hour drive up here? I go by all the forests. Vast carbon sink. Vast carbon sink. You probably have a rainforest worth of carbon sink here. That's a really good thing. That's what I learned yesterday. Watching a silly James Bond movie, and it was silly. It wasn't so silly when they showed 2 little microchips. Yeah, chips we have now is what they were showing. It's kind of a mind blower. Some visual thinker made that up in a silly movie. I didn't think it was quite so silly. Okay, half of all large 3D printers are from Europe. This is the state-of-the-art electronic chip making machine. And it's from Holland. And it's based on mathematical research that was done in the US at a university. but the Dutch made it. Look at all the mechanical gadgets it has. Yes, it's got export controls on it. I'm going to prophesize that it will be obsolete in 2 years. The Japanese are coming up with a new technology for making the finest chips. And then there's the Mate 60 out there. Doesn't have the greatest camera. But our State Department's having kittens over that phone right now. Yep. The only way to stay ahead is to stay ahead. Now, this goes back to education. You give that kid the advanced math book because we're going to need his skills to stay ahead. There's a relationship between what's going on with here and some kid getting labeled pathological demand disorder because they're made to do baby math. I heard about 3 cases of that in the last 6 months. 1 in the UK, 2 in the US. And they make up all these bureaucratic, stupid reasons why they can't give this 8-year-old more advanced math books. It's not going to cost money. Get the book out of the attic. Give them the old-fashioned books. That's the kind they need. And the mirrors in that machine come from the Zeiss microscope company from Germany. But you see, we've paid the price for taking out shop classes and things like that. We're screening out the visual thinkers. We need their skills. Okay, all the equipment you see here, is imported into the US. It's a state-of-the-art pork slaughter plant. The equipment's all imported. And that's because in Quebec, Canada, and Europe, they haven't taken out the shop classes. Right now, we know how to build a beef plant in the US, but pork and chicken, we have to import the equipment from Holland. All kinds of mechanical stuff like this coming from Europe. And the cloth for the Mars rover comes from the UK. It's woven on high-tech European looms. And this is the Steve Jobs Theater, structural glass walls. It's from Italy and Germany. It should have been from the Corning Glass Works. And I can tell you right now, I'm not a fan of private equity. They're buying up vet clinics. I don't like what they're doing to them. I didn't like sitting in the airport a month ago and learning that Boeing had sold one of their factories to private equity. And then I'm reading about loose rudder bolts and private equity together. They ruined Boeing. Yeah, they made them money on Wall Street for about 15 years, but then they paid for that. I can tell you, I hate that kind of stuff. We need the people who can do stuff. There's going to be your visual thinkers, and it's going to be your mathematicians. And we need to have both to get stuff done. We need to have a lot more emphasis in the world on how do we actually do stuff. I liked an article that the Harvard Business Review wrote one time, and they said, don't think it's a good idea that our best and our brightest just want to do the financial sector. No. You've got the spice underground here. You've got to get it out economically without wrecking the environment. Yeah. See the movie Dune? You'll know what that's all about. Okay. We paid the price for taking these classes out. When I was in elementary school, I loved art, sewing, and woodworking. I just loved these things. I would have hated school if I hadn't had the hands-on classes. No, there's too much emphasis right now, both in Canada and in the US, on just test results. We need to have a lot more emphasis on how does a kid get into a good career. I was really pleased to find out there's an autistic kid here that loves the fixed motorcycles and snowmobile equipment, because that job's not going away. That's what I like about that. Theater, I didn't care about being in the play, but I loved making scenery and costumes. That's something that can become a career. That's really good stuff. And here's a great program they have for autistic adults in Denver, Colorado called TACT, and they're teaching autistic individuals trades. And what they do is they kind of give them a 2-week exploration where they can try on different things like fixing cars, carpentry, welding, cybersecurity, and then they have a 2-semester class where you have the mechanic instructor, but you also have a job coach. Because I just heard about a veterinary tech that was autistic, talking about too much controversial stuff at work. That's where it needs to be pulled aside in the office and says, okay, the politics, leave it at home. Hockey, you can talk about all you want, but not politics. Leave it at home. We don't need that at the vet clinic. Yeah, you don't need to bring that stuff into work. But that's where somebody needs to take him into the office and just coach him on things that, don't get in all kinds of arguments at work about this stuff. It's not worth it. And then they have a contract with the local car dealers. And the job coach is with that person for another 2 months to help them get along with the other people in the shop. And I was just up in northern Wisconsin, and there's a guy, an autistic guy, he's fixing all the garbage trucks. He figured out how to fix all the hydraulics too. It fixes everything. He loves it. He's in the shop all by himself. But you need people to fix that stuff. Okay, Broadway show with autistic actors. Let's show what we can do. Now, my grandfather was the co-inventor of the autopilot for airplanes, MIT-trained engineer. He worked with an autistic man who came up with a goofy, radical new idea for an autopilot. And aviation thought it was stupid. So they tinkered in a barn, in a loft. Little guys innovate in every field. The little people innovate. I don't care what field it's in. But it got ripped off, and the stolen version was in every plane during World War II. They needed a lawyer. This is where you really do need the different kinds of thinkers. Our educational system is screening out people like me. I can't do algebra. I still can't do algebra. There's some states that wouldn't be able to graduate from high school. But I saw a lot of people in the meat industry go in the back door, get a job on the line, then gravitate over to the maintenance department. 15 years later, they're building the entire plant, the next plant. And I've worked with a lot of shop people. I call them the clever engineers. Often just barely a high school education, but they're inventing and patenting equipment. They're not just building it, inventing and patenting equipment. There's two parts of engineering. There's the clever engineers that don't have the degrees. Then there's the degreed engineer. So to make something like a food processing plant, I need both. We don't understand math. Refrigeration, boilers, that's for the mathematicians. Packaging equipment, all kinds of mechanical devices, that's for us. And one of these guys, he's got a corporate jet. He's doing really well. He builds beef plants. And that's a hydraulic power pack he built. If you know anything about hydraulics, that's just a thing of beauty right there. That's clever engineering department. And that is center track restrainer system. This piece of equipment's in all the big plants. And this is a piece of equipment that I worked on developing. The person who built the first one was definitely autistic, owned a shop. But I'm hearing today they won't let the autistic kids take shop because of liability. Well, in my generation, special ed owned the shops. I am not kidding. They owned the shops. Yeah, and we need their skills. Okay, collaboration in the food processing plants. And I've seen this division of labor every single meat company I've worked with. And you've got 3 big plants in Canada that have my equipment. Guelph, High River, and Lakeside. They've all got my equipment. Okay, on collaborating on the visual thinking book, I wrote the kind of disorganized rough drafts, and Betsy, my co-author, my verbal thinker, she smoothed it all out. So that's the 2 kinds of minds working together and collaborating. Really important thing to do. Okay, architects, they make a building pretty. The engineers make sure it doesn't fall down. You need to have both. And the people I worked with, I'm going to guess about 20% of the people I worked with were either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. Owning shops, patenting equipment, most of them couldn't do higher math. Yeah, we're losing them. We're losing them. Okay, I have grandparents come up to me all the time, and they find out they're autistic when the kids get diagnosed. But those grandparents had good jobs. That's because they learned work skills early. One of the problems I'm seeing is a lot of parents overprotecting their fully verbal kid, and they're not learning shopping, bank account, just basic things in life. No, they've got to get out and do things. You know, let's have 2 real jobs before they graduate from high school. Work skills are not the same as school skills, but these granddads had paper routes at age 11, so we're going to need to find a substitute for the paper routes. Walking dogs, maybe a church volunteer job. Start these things at 11, where they're working for somebody outside the family. That's what they need to be doing. Okay, what would happen to some of our top innovators in today's educational system? What happened to Michelangelo? Dirty little 12-year-old, dropped out of school, little grubby kid. He was a slob, a brat. But he was running around all these churches seeing great art. That's the exposure. Then he was mentored, pulled into a studio and apprenticed. So with a lot of careers, it's exposure first, than mentoring. But I'm seeing too many kids growing up today totally removed from the world of the practical. I had a student in my class that had never measured anything. And they're going to make policy about important stuff in the future. Well, I'm kind of concerned about that. That concerns me. Steve Jobs was probably on the spectrum. Einstein had no speech until age 3. He'd be in an autism class today. Thomas Edison was probably on the spectrum, but he'd learned how to work at an early age, and he was mentored. He had a person that taught him how to use the telegraph. Here's another famous autistic person. I love his engineering. Some of the other stuff maybe needs some mentoring. He was horribly bullied as a child, horribly bullied. Pushed down the stairs, had his face smashed in. Maybe that has something to do with some of the other stuff that's not as good as the rockets. Yeah, horribly, horribly bullied. This is something that's got to be stopped. And one of the things that helped me on the bullying in elementary school is my teacher explained to the other children that I had a disability that wasn't visible like a wheelchair, and they needed to be helping me. So bullying started in my teenage years. Okay, this is the other reason for keeping all the hands-on classes in the schools. A Nobel Prize winner in science was more likely to have an arts and crafts hobby compared to other scientists. Yeah, we need to be keeping these classes. Okay, tips for working with minds that are different. One of the things that I'm going to have a problem with at work is rapid multitasking. Don't put me on the McDonald's takeout window. There's plenty of other jobs. We don't have to do that. That rapid multitasking, that's the thing that I have problems with. And then I talked about the pilot's checklist. I cannot remember long strings of verbal information because I have no working memory. If I was a computer on Intel 286, but I've got warehouses full of servers for memory, but I'm working it through that little tiny processor. And also we need to stretch these kids. Mother was always getting me to try new things, but she'd give me choices. We could do this or do that. And when I was scared to go to my aunt's ranch when I was 15, she said, you have a choice. You can go for a week or you can stay all summer. Not going wasn't one of the options. And I got out there and I loved it. Yeah, I'm seeing too many kids. You don't let them become recluses in the bedroom. You give them some choices, but they got to get out and they got to do things. Because I can tell you, these video game recluses, they're not learning how to make video games. Also, video game design's all going to get replaced by AI. I'm watching all that really carefully. The other thing that's starting to happen right now is graduates in computer science, hiring is slowing down. AI is going to do a lot of the simple programming, like web page programming and stuff like that. That's going to get automated. But if something's hands-on, AI's not touching that. AI isn't going to fix elevators anytime soon. Or make really important decisions about how much biofuel can we feed to airplanes and have it be sustainable. I don't think 1,000 hogs worth of fat for one flight is going to work really well. And when I figured, you got to look at those things. The chemists make the magic box. I don't know how you make airplane fuel out of corn and out of pig fat or out of garbage. And you certainly don't want it made out of palm oil. That also works. Cutting down the rainforest for that. They can make it out of all these kind of things. I don't know how they do it. It's like magic to me, mathematical magic. But the visual thinker is the one that sees the feed stuff. What do I feed into the box to make the airplane fuel? And I go, wait a minute, I'm not going to have I can't grow enough sugar. I can't grow enough corn. I can't get enough of what they call the feedstock. That's the thing I look at. I was kind of shocked to find out the mathematicians don't look at that. It's amazing what you can make airplane fuel out of. But you can't get enough of the stuff is the problem. Okay, where is a student 10 years after high school? I was building my very first projects. That's what I was doing. And the way I sold myself since I was weird is I showed people my drawings. I learned to sell my work rather than myself. That's what I learned to do. And that's the drawing I sent to Cargill. And I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant, starting with High River in Alberta, the Cargill plant in Alberta. And you might wonder why make it curved, because cattle tend to go back to where they come from. So that's why I made it curved. but I learned to sell my work rather than myself. That's another one of the pictures I sent into the Cargill originally. And I love the fact that the movie made replicas of my projects. What the movie showed that was really, really, really accurate is that, well, they showed my projects, and they replicated my projects. I thought it was just so cool. And it showed visual thinking. And I had a nice brochure. And that was another picture I sent, a job I did in '83. I sent them that picture. So it was kind of a 30-second wow. I get lots of exercise. I do 100 old lady push-ups every night. Yeah, just the front end comes up. But I do 100 of them, then I lay on the floor and I do 100 strokes on the floor every night. All right, let's look at work experience. And we need to have a gradual transition from school to work. At 13, Mother got me a little sewing job where I worked with a seamstress that did alteration of dresses. So I'd take apart dresses and I would hem them. 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. I basically ran a horse barn. For 3 years, I cleaned 9 stalls every day. Didn't do any studying. But boy, I learned a lot about work. And 17, I had a sign painting business. And I had to learn to make a sign that the client wanted. And my first sign was for a hair salon. So I put the Breck lady on it. I figured they'd rather have that. Flying saucers just wouldn't be welcome on a sign for a hair salon. And then when I was in college, I did career-relevant internships. I worked in a research lab. I was an aide for a kid with autism. So I had all of this work experience before I graduated. I'm seeing smart kids with autism graduate from college, never had any work experience. They cannot handle the workplace. It's a different set of skills. Back doors into jobs. There's a scene in the HBO movie where I walk up to the editor of the Farmer Ranchman and I get his card. Because I knew if I worked for that magazine, that would help my career. All kinds of meetings I could get into for free with the press pass. Yes, I saw that door. Also, I had the guts to go up and ask for the card, because when I was a child, I sold candy for charity. So that got me used to talking to people. And in my neighborhood, when kids were 7 and 8 years old, parents had a party, you had to greet the guests and serve the snacks. That taught really important skills. So I could go up and get the card. Elementary school life skills training in the 50s. This was done with all kids. Well, we've got teenagers now that haven't done any of this stuff. I've had teenagers that come up to me at the airport, do their first shopping at an airport store, and they find out that they can do it. You know, I think some of the parents get so hung up on the label, they don't think their kid can do anything. I got 50 cents a week for allowance when I was 8 years old. I knew exactly what I could buy with that. If I wanted a 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I was learning that really young, about saving money. Friends who shared interests. How do you get friends when you're autistic? Most of my friends have a shared interest in animal behavior, maybe in building things. When I was in college, I still got bullied. And so I participated in a campus-wide variety show, making scenery, singing a silly song. That helped a lot of social doors. Friends through shared interests. I just suggested to a mom the other day to get her kid in a chess club, and for another mom to get her kid into a computer club where they build computers. There's all kinds of stuff like this around. It's right there. But that's where they get the friends who shared interests. And then I was learning work skills like fixing up this shed and making it look really nice. And I decorated it the way I thought people would like it. That's a very important work skill. And here's a goofy sign that I was painting for the state fair. And how did I get this job? I walked up to an old sign painter and I showed him some pictures of my signs. This is a really stupid exhibit. It was a wax dummy and a freezer chest full of ice. This absolutely, totally stupid thing. That's me up there. But that's learning that go out there and get the job. And that's my sign painting truck. Learning to drive. A lot of them are not learning how to drive. It's going to take a whole lot longer. They need to practice for a much longer time in a totally safe place before they do any traffic. I started in the middle of the horse pasture. And then my aunt's mailbox on the ranch was 3 miles away on a dirt road. So I got 6 miles or maybe 12 kilometers of practice of driving every day. And I did that for 6 weeks before we did any traffic. A lot more practice in a totally safe place where I don't have to think about how to operate the car. That's absolutely essential. Because if I hadn't learned to drive, I wouldn't have been able to do the things I did in the cattle industry. It's that simple. Okay, a slow transition from school to work. I want jobs outside the home on a schedule at age 11. We got to replace those old paper routes, church volunteer jobs. I talked to a lady just a few months ago. She was so proud that she was the church's coffee lady. She was 12 years old. That cost nothing to set up. Shopping. And then let's keep some real jobs before they graduate. Lots of times you just get them in the back door, short circuit the interview. You know, somebody has a shop. I saw a lot of stores around here that I think might be just excellent for kids to work in. And another important mentor was Jim the contractor. He seeked me out to design projects for him. He showed me how to set up my business, because those are things where you're going to need help. Okay, finding mentors and teachers. My mother taught me to read at age 8. I couldn't read. She taught me how to read, sounding out my words out loud out of The Wizard of Oz. That's how I learned how to read. Great elementary school teachers. I had a great science teacher in high school. I was a bored student, could care less about studying, never could do the higher math. Had to be tutored through statistics. I got a C in statistics, and that was a gift. And then when I went to graduate school, I got one of the grad students to tutor me. But I did something about it. When I failed my first quiz, I did something about it. I asked for help. A lot of students don't ask for help soon enough. But I had some very good mentors. Sensory problems. Sensory issues are real, and they're going to be highly variable between different people. Highly, highly, highly variable. Now, one of the ways you can help an individual get over a sound that they hate is let them control it. Let's say it's a vacuum cleaner. Let the kid or the adult turn the vacuum cleaner on and off where they control it. And when they control it, they may be able to tolerate it a whole lot better. That's a very, very basic thing. Let them control the thing that makes the noise. And if you wear headphones all the time, it's going to make sound sensitivity worse. Have them with you all the time. You see, that's control. Have them with you all the time. So if the fire alarm goes off or some other bad thing, then you can put them on. Finding clothes that are soft. I find when I buy new pants, I have to wash them 3 times before they stop itching. That's something I still have to do now. But sensory issues are real. And oftentimes, a kid that has a visual processing problem will hate escalators. They may also complain if they see the print jiggle on the page. This explains maybe a subgroup of dyslexia, not all dyslexia, just one subgroup. And here's a simple thing that you can try. Try printing the homework on light blue paper, light tan paper. Try different pale pastel papers. Let the child or the adult pick the paper. I've seen it work. And someone might say, well, you don't have any evidence-based. Well, the problem is if I take all dyslexics and I test them, maybe this only works on 10% of them. But when it does work, it works. And you just have to try it and you'll know instantly if it works. Some individuals have images that break up like migraines. This just shows how the print might look to the kid jiggling on the page. I've had adults have this. Try some colored paper and they go, I can read. We need to find LED lights that do not flicker. I'll tell you how to find them. Whip out your phone, put it in slow motion video, and the LEDs that flicker, you'll see them. So find some LEDs that don't flicker. So what do you do if you've got a classroom with no windows? Buy a lamp, put an LED in it that the kids picked out that does not flicker, put it next to the desk to blot out the lights. That's what you can do. But these are some very basic sensory things. The most important accommodations at work are going to be the lighting for certain individuals, the pilot's checklists for sequential tasks, and just avoiding rapid multitasking jobs. If you're fixing motorcycles, you're not doing rapid multitasking. It's just that simple. Some individuals, when there's a lot of noise, it takes extreme effort to screen out the background noise. I'm basically functionally deaf in a noisy environment. Some individuals may need some sensory breaks just to calm down. Now, let's say you've got a nonverbal individual, adult, and they have a meltdown. There's three things that mainly cause that. Frustration because they cannot communicate. Got to give them a way to communicate. Sensory overload, and a hidden, painful medical issue they can't tell you about. Doctors have a tendency to just go, oh, well, that's just the autism. No, I ran into an adult that had scurvy, vitamin C deficiency from eating such a limited diet. Yeah, that was really serious. Okay, what are some of the things that you can do to help desensitize? Environmental enrichment is an effective treatment for autism. That's the title of a paper. You can look it up online. And what you do is you stimulate two senses at the same time. Maybe you smell cinnamon and touch a cold water glass. You always keep changing the pair of stimuli. Yeah, it's simple. Sometimes it helps. And it's an adjunct to other therapies. Now, there's been a lot of controversy these days about applied behavior analysis, early intervention treatments. Well, there were some really bad old-fashioned programs where they forced the kid into sensory overload with way too much emphasis on eye contact. This is what I want out of the little kids. I want speech. I want the ability to wait and take turns at games. I want skills like dressing. And the child should like going to therapy. That's what I want out of 3-year-olds. That's simple. I don't care what the name of the program is. Those are the 4 things I want out of it. You don't need to worry about the eye contact. Speech and turn taking is a lot more important. And some individuals, they've got to really, really use extreme effort to screen out background noise. And the problem is the whole sensory system gets hyped up and sets off a bunch of fear circuits. Okay, we already talked about some of the interventions. Put a non-flickering LED light next to the kid's desk. You can do that. Well, I already talked about the pastel paper. That's a simple thing that you can do. I want to talk about simple stuff that you can take home and you can just do. That's the kind of things that we want to do. Okay, wait a minute, I'm getting goofed up on this. Okay, if you're working with individuals that are nonverbal, some of them can learn to type independently. And here are 3 excellent books, or 4 excellent books written by people who type independently that have a lot of movements they can't control. They can't speak, but they can learn to type. And these books are all available on Amazon, or you can get to order them through the local bookstore here. But some of these people almost have like a locked-in disorder, and there's a good brain inside there. Here's the secret to teaching them type. You've got to use a device where the print appears next to the keyboard. Now, when you type on a tablet, the print appears next to the keyboard. When you type on a laptop, you look down here, they have to gaze shift. That doesn't work, because the print appears up here. Can't gaze shift. The print has to appear right next to the keyboard. A tablet will do that. Also, if you put a keyboard on a box and put it up to the screen, you could do the same thing. But they've got to be able to look at the key and see the letter appear at the same time. That's absolutely essential. There's no ability to gaze shift. I really like that last book there, Fall Down 7 Times, Get Up 8. That's the sequel to The Reason I Jump. He's older, gives them much more insights. If you're working with nonverbals, and I'm not talking 3-year-olds here, older kids and adults, these books are must-reads. Yep, some of them have a good brain in there. All right, now slow processor speed. I have a problem with all of these things. They'll have the problem. Rapid conversation, rapid back and forth conversation. Goes too fast, the chit-chat conversation, I can't follow it. It just goes too fast. Rapid multitasking, McDonald's takeout window. Rapid response to a question. You're working with the little kids, give them time to respond. They're like a phone with lousy service. Takes time to download the web page. Remembering long strings of verbal instruction, we already discussed that. And I have problems with interrupting, and I know it's rude, and I can't help it because my processor speed is just too slow. And I'm stuck with these problems. These are things where I need the pilot's checklist. I was at the airport one time, and the printer was messed up, and my boarding pass was printed too light, and it wouldn't scan. So the trainee was trying to print out the boarding pass. Then the other agent just came over there, reached over the thing like this, and the ticket comes out. I was there watching. I couldn't tell you what buttons they pressed. It went too fast. Let's say I had to become a gate agent. I got like 10 things I got to do on that computer. I'd have to get with them when they're not busy and write down the keystrokes for print a boarding pass. Write down the keystrokes for change of seat. And then I would go home and I would memorize them and practice on a keyboard and absolutely memorize them. But when they just went like this on the keyboard, I couldn't remember that because I couldn't remember it. I don't have the processing speed to remember that. No, I have to write it down. And then I'd take time and I'd make jingles up for print a boarding pass. Well, I don't know, I could make up something kind of funny about printing a boarding pass. And that would be the keystrokes. But that's what I'd have to do to have that job. But you know where they need me? Frozen jet bridges. I'm gonna make them go away. They delay flights. They delay flights like for an hour to unload. They do stupid things with de-icing trucks trying to fix them. They're really stupid. I'll fix the frozen jet bridges. You see, that's where they need me. That's where they need the visual thinker. Okay, attention shifting. Slow processor speed, shifting back and forth between two different rapid things. This is an old study that really shows attention shifting slowness. Look at how many times, watching an old black and white movie, that the normal person shifted back and forth with the eyes. Yeah, processor speed. One of the reasons why I can't look at the eyes while they're talking is that overloads my processor. Okay, the little kids, slow down when you talk. The grown-ups talk fast and went to gibberish. Give the kid time to respond. He's like a slow computer. And if you click on the mouse too many times, it just freezes. You get in their face too much, they freeze. Teachable moments. That's a 50s thing. Well, I'd stir my drink with my finger. Mother didn't scream no. She'd say, now use the spoon to stir the drink. She'd give the instruction rather than yelling at me. Yep, that's another important thing. And teach turn taking. We need to teach the little ones. If they're spinning a coin, we're going to take turns spinning the coin. You got to teach them how to wait and take turns in all kinds of games. Yep, that's a working memory shot there. Now, fear. A lot of autistics have a lot of anxiety. When puberty hit, I had horrible anxiety. Every little thing I was afraid of. Every little thing. I was terrified of this plane. I was afraid of airplanes and public speaking. Those are two things I was terrified of. Have really good slides. Then when you panic, you change the slide. And that airplane, when it put the gear down, I was sure the bottom of the plane was falling out. Well, if I learned more about it, I want to hear that sound. I don't want them to land without the wheels. That'd be pretty bad. And the way I got over fear of flying was I got to ride in the cockpit of one of these. This is early 70s, hauling heifers to Puerto Rico. And after cattle were allowed to pee and poop all over this airplane, and it dripped out the bottom of the airplane, it still flew. This was like airplane abuse. I went on that plane. You have to make it interesting, make the scary thing interesting. That's what you got to do. Fear. It's the main emotion in autism. I have a large amygdala. And one of the reasons I have to drink water all the time is because of medication I take. I've been on an old tricyclic antidepressant for 40 years. It stopped the anxiety. And that is fully explained in my book, Thinking in Pictures. Now, way too many drugs are given out to little kids like candy. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But for people that have a fear system that's overactive, a low dose of something like Prozac can really make a difference. And the mistake that's made is too high a dose. Then you get agitation. Then you can't sleep. It's starter dose or less. It's all explained in Thinking in Pictures. Even though the book is old, the drugs haven't changed. They all have the same drugs. But too high a dose And I had colitis that just wouldn't stop. My health was falling apart. This was in my early 30s. Colitis cleared up in 2 weeks after I went on the medication. Yeah, better living through chemistry. Yep, I got it. Also, I used my squeezing machine to calm down with deep pressure. And one of the reasons that worked is, again, I could control it. Now, there's other ways that you can do pressure that cost a lot less money. Weighted vests, weighted blankets. Now, the thing is, not every autistic kid responds to pressure. Also, the other thing you got to do with these kids, show them interesting stuff to get them interested in interesting stuff. And I got fascinated with optical illusion rooms. And my science teacher said to me, you got to figure out how to make it. Here's fantastic pattern math by Stephen Hawking. You know what he had to say about disability? Concentrate on those things that disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. He could do math in his head real super well. Oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this wrong here. And interesting things to read. My idea of interesting is science. I brought one of those with me to read on the plane. There's fractals. Plants have math in them. And here are some really, really cool free programs online. Well, what I want to do right now is I want to just open it up for some questions. Open it up for questions. Talk about cattle, talk about anything that might interest you. And I like questions. That's the best part of it.
Okay, so we are opening it up to questions, and we have a few volunteers who are kind of check out who's putting their hands up first, and we'll try to do 2 in-person questions and then 1 online question for those who are joining us virtually.
And then you can give me the online questions.
I will give you the online
Okay.
questions. Okay. So any hands up? Anybody? We have. Oh, there's. You have a question.
Okay.
All right. So we'll come over to you. There's also a mic in the middle of the room if you want to make your way there if you have a question.
Okay, that would be good.
Where's our question? Oh, I know this gentleman.
Okay, maybe you can use the mic so I can hear you.
A toss is that thing hell
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
why is it that thing?
Sorry, he was nonverbal autistic and he's learning to use his words, so he just needs a second.
Okay.
Is why is that thing toss pooping and peeing and that thing?
He was wondering about the cows in the airplanes that peeing and pooping. He was wondering why that was happening.
What was happening?
So on the airplane photo that you showed, there was cows in the air.
Well, they were hauling the cows to the Puerto Rico. They were dairy breeding heifers. And they were hauling those, and I got to sit on the jump seat in the cockpit. They take off, those cows don't do anything. They don't even realize the plane's up in the air. They were just, sitting there. And then we flew over the Bermuda Triangle. And the sky and the water was deep blue. And they were just, the heifers had been sold to people in Puerto Rico, and they were using them to get dairy started.
What would you
That's
say?
why the heifers were going there. And I couldn't hear some of the question. I still have some auditory processing problems, and I don't hear hard consonant sounds clearly. I have to figure it out by context. Still have to do that today. And so I didn't hear most of what he said, and I'm sorry about that. Okay, let's try another question. I'd certainly be happy to talk to you afterwards.
What do you say to the school teacher who is overwhelmed with, let's say, 30 kids in the class, one of whom is autistic, and what are they supposed to do?
Well, that can be a big problem, because some of those kids will need an aid. Now, these little kids that needed the math books, you just dig the algebra book out of the attic, and he's going to have fun at his desk with that, and she can deal with the other 29 kids. You see, that would have fixed that situation. But that's a situation where that autistic kid probably is going to need an aide. Yeah, that's the problem. I went to a small school, there were 12 kids in a class. And most of the time I had my problems, but it was a much smaller, you know, we'd do reading, for example, and then the different kids would take turns reading out loud. Then we'd sit and they'd teach subtraction and fractions on the blackboard. You know, I was able to handle that, but it was a much smaller class. See, the problem with autism is you got all these different levels of it. You see, you've got a smart kid where he might need some special ed in reading, but needs to be doing high school math in 3rd grade. And I was really horrified to hear that there were 3 cases where they made him do the baby math, and then they became gigantic behavior problems. Those are kids who need to just move them ahead. Don't give me a reason why I can't move them ahead. Just give them a laptop with a Khan Academy on it or something like that, and they can work on that in the classroom. You just move them ahead. And then there's others where you have a lot more problems with disruption and distractibility. See, the word autism is getting put on such a broad variety of kids to get services, and some need very, very different services. No, it can be a big problem. But on the other hand, we need their skills. We'd have no technology without autism. There wouldn't be any computers, there wouldn't be any lights. Tesla, he was the inventor of the electric power plant. He was autistic. You do like electricity. You see, the brains that are interested in what they do, they're the ones that give us technology. I've been out to Silicon Valley. Half those computer programmers are autistic, and they're the mathematical kinds of minds. Then I go work at the meat plant, and they've got a guy in the maintenance shop that can build anything, and he's probably autistic. Now, a place that can be very dangerous for somebody on the spectrum is when you change bosses. I almost lost my job at the magazine because we got a new boss, and he thought I was weird. But fortunately, Susie, who did the advertising layout, she recognized the warning signs. I didn't. She said, let's make a big scrapbook of all your articles. We showed them to Jim, and he gave me a raise. I saved my job by showing my work off.
So we have one online question, and then we
Okay.
have 2 questions here. The first online question is from Jen Davies on the Timmins campus, and it's, what strategies did you find effective in getting through your amazing PhD work, getting the bottleneck, given the bottleneck caused by your working memory?
Well, I had to tell you, I had to be tutored in math. Okay, starting out with a freshman year, it wasn't algebra, it was a lot of matrices and probability and statistics. I went to small college, I went to the teacher, and he tutored me in his office. I asked for help. Then for masters, I had to get a graduate student to tutor me. But I asked for help. I had to be tutored through every single math class. And then I majored in psychology originally to avoid math classes. Because I had to avoid the math. But then when I got out into the meatpacking world, I discovered whole shops full of what I now call clever engineers. They can't do math, but they can build anything. Well, you can't keep the plant running without these people. They're the ones who design all the clever mechanical devices. That's not made by the degreed engineers. You see, you need both kinds of minds. And I discovered there's all this engineering stuff that's just done in the shops. Doesn't require a degree. Industrial process equipment, that's what it's called. You wouldn't be able to keep anything running without these people. See, that's your visual thinkers.
Okay, we have a question here.
Where can I borrow the hugging machine?
How did it what?
Your hugging machine, the squeeze machine that you made
Yeah,
yourself?
I found the deep pressure from that calmed me. The other thing it helped with is it desensitized me so I could tolerate people touching me because I controlled it. You see, this is really important on desensitizing a lot of the sensory problems, like with the noise. If the person can turn the thing on and off, the vacuum cleaner, whatever it is. Okay, let's say you want to work in the shop and you can't stand the sound of the electric drill. Well, then you go down there when nobody's there and you turn it on and off and you drill holes and all kinds of stuff. and you can desensitize yourself because you're turning the drill on and off.
What did it feel like being bullied when you were younger?
What does it feel like being?
Being bullied when you were younger.
Well, fortunately, when I was in elementary school, I wasn't lonely. But in the 50s, the neighborhood kids would just go out and do all kinds of free play. I had friends who shared interests, like to fly kites and things like that. When I was in high school, I had friends with riding horses, with Model Rocket Club, and my science teacher was the Model Rocket Club coach. But get involved with a lot of different activities where you can have friends. Now, a lot of individuals on the autism spectrum are kind of clumsy, so sports is often not the good thing, but there's some exceptions to that, because sport is another way that you can get friends who shared interests. Try lots of different things. Okay, let's get some questions here.
Oh, okay, it's working now. You talk a lot about, like you mentioned your mother and how she looked at those teachable moments and things like that. I'm just wondering what advice you would give other parents who often, when they receive a new autism diagnosis, feel helpless and don't know where to go. What sort of things did your mom do or people in your life to
Well, she
advocate
could
for
see
you?
that I could do stuff. She saw I was very good at art when I got to be 7 or 8 years old, and she always encouraged my art. And I would just do the same horse head over and over again and suggested, well, you need to be doing, draw the whole horse, draw the saddle, draw the stable. Take that fixated interest and you want to broaden it. Broaden it. Take the thing the kid's interested in it and broaden it.
Thank you.
That's one of the things that you want to do.
We have another online question.
Okay.
What would you recommend for an adults who are diagnosed late with autism to regulate emotion or overwhelming feelings?
When they get overwhelmed, well, I have to find out what situation they're getting overwhelmed in. Is it when it's too much noise? Are they getting overwhelmed? I need to learn more about that. Because the kind of stuff I cannot do, okay, people love to socialize in noisy restaurants, and there's a lot of fast back and forth chit-chat conversation where they kind of almost like laugh and stuff in rhythm. I can't follow that. So what tends to happen with me at a party is I go find one person, we'll talk to them for a while, then I go find somebody else and talk to them for a while. Because I just don't have the processor speed. Also, I get interested in talking about interesting stuff where there's content to the conversation. Sort of chit-chat just for social. I mean, I know how to, say good morning, talk about the weather, do a little bit of that. I know how to do that, learned how to do that. But the people that I'm the best friends with, it's the shared interests. We like to talk about animal behavior together, for example. That's something I find really interesting. Talk about handling bison. We were doing that this afternoon. That's something I find interesting. Okay.
What has been like the most interesting thing that you've learned about autism and animals and stuff like that?
Well, what helped me with autism and animals is being a visual thinker. Animals don't think in language. See, some of the people that have a hard time understanding animals are very verbal. They can't imagine thought without words. Well, animals' memories and things are going to be pictures, sounds, smells. There's evidence in the dog, for example, that they can do smell pictures because the nose is connected up to the visual cortex of the brain. That's very trippy, smell pictures. That's a totally different kind of way of perceiving things. And since I don't think primarily in words, that helped me in my work with animals, helped me a whole lot. It's a sensory-based world, not a word-based world. But I want to emphasize autism can kind of be 3 types. You can have the visual thinker like me, the more mathematical pattern thinker. Then there's a word thinker autistic. And these are the ones that know all the facts about stuff. And they're often very good at specialized retail. There's been some very good successes at car dealerships, auto supply store, where they memorized every part number in the warehouse. They didn't have to use the computer for inventory. That was valuable. Selling business insurance, products that were specialized. And they were appreciated for their knowledge of specialized things. That can often be a very good career for the word type of autistic that likes history and facts.
Thank you. We have an online question and then 2 more in-person
Okay, and we'll take those, then we'll call it a night, and then
Okay.
I'll hang around and talk to people that want to discuss more.
Okay, so online and 2 personal, or 2 in-person. The online one is, how do I find jobs or volunteer opportunities for 2 adults with disabilities who are low functioning?
Okay, well, let's look at things they can do. One of the things that's been successful is folding towels for hotels. And that's something they can learn. And it's something that needs to be done. Don't think that's going to go away. Doing jobs like that. That's been one that's been successful. And the other thing is, it's real work. They know the difference between just silly little busy work and actual real work. And a lot of them can do more than you think they can do. And you have to show them how to do the job and have a quiet place where they can do it. But that's been one job in hotels that's actually been really successful.
We work with a nonverbal autistic child in a school, and we are trying to come up with different ways to ease the child.
How old is the
comes
child?
to transitions. 4.
He's 4. Okay, and is he talking?
No, nonverbal.
Not talking. Okay, now the first thing we got to do is give him a way to communicate. I threw a lot of temper tantrums when I couldn't communicate and I could just scream. Maybe sign language, maybe a picture board, or communication device, but they got to have some way of communicating their needs. That's the first step. They're cold, or they need to use the bathroom. They're just basic needs. The other thing I'm very concerned about with some of these kids is the really picky eating, where they've had such limited diets, they're actually getting some of the old vitamin deficiency diseases, and that's happened because the diet was so limited. And one of the ways to help with the picky eaters is to get them involved with food prep. In the kitchen, we can play in it, gunk around in it. Dining room, we have manners. But in the kitchen, we can put your hands in it. And sometimes that helps to get them to try some different things when they're allowed to play with it in the kitchen. But I'm very concerned with these very limited diets. They better be taking a multiple vitamin, because I've already found one young man who came down with scurvy, which is vitamin C deficiency. He had weird swelling of the legs and stuff. The doctors were just saying that it was autism. Well, I looked up the C levels in his diet, and it was definitely way below the minimums. Yeah, he had scurvy. Yeah, old-fashioned vitamin deficiency disease that we don't study in home ec anymore. I studied about those in home ec. That's why I know about them. And the B ones for the B vitamin deficiencies, those were very nasty. You don't want those. But I get concerned that they're not, or a kid that's eating no protein. Just ran into one of those the other day. Mainly cookies and bread for his total diet. Yeah, I'm concerned about that.
My question is, when there's a negative behavior in a class, it can often trigger behaviors with people who have autism. Is there anything we can do so they aren't triggered as a result of the negative behavior?
Okay, now what's triggering the behavior?
So there's an outburst in class, or somebody is defiant in class for whatever
reason.
Well,
so you got to look, is the kid got enough cognitive ability to understand reward or punishment? If I had a temper tantrum in 3rd grade, there was no television for one night. And it was I'd get home that night and mother would say, well, Mrs. Deach called today, there'll be no TV tonight. But I understood that connection. And temper tantrums were no TV for just one night. But there's others that don't have the cognitive ability to make that connection. But I've also heard about the kids where he's wonderful at home, behaves horrible at school. Or behaves super well at school and horrible at home. See that all the time. Well, you need to find out what what the place that's got the good behavior is doing. But I've seen that all the time. And some of these kids, I've seen a nonverbal kid, when they drive to McDonald's, if mom was driving, he'd scream because mom would stop. Dad was driving, he didn't scream because he wouldn't stop when he screamed. And we've got to make sure that rules are very consistent between home and school. My mother and the teacher worked together. The rules were the same at home and school. They worked very closely together. That was important. Also, the class was small. There was 12 kids in the class, not 30. Okay, think we got all the questions? Okay, right there. Maybe I can hear you if you just speak and I can repeat the question.
Hi, Dr. Grandin. My question is more veterinary based, and I was just wondering if, so in your planning of animal handling facilities that facilitate animal behavior and encourage their comfort to the best of your ability,
Yep.
does sound therapy play a role in their overall wellness and husbandry?
Does what play
sound therapy?
Down therapy?
Sound. Music, sound therapy.
Oh, you mean music?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I like to listen to music, but one of the problems I had playing musical instruments, I never could figure out how to finger a flute. I could sing on pitch, but I could never coordinate my music with the other people. So that wasn't my thing. But another kid, you expose them to music, they're going to take off with it.
Well, my question was, does that play a role in the veterinary husbandry?
You mean playing music?
No, does music playing contribute to
Well, there is some
improved
studies done in
behaviors?
dairies
Yes.
on playing music, and you want to make sure it's not too fast a tempo. That's one of the things that's been learned. And there's some evidence that certain types of music may be helpful in a dairy, for example, the milking cows. Now, there's actually been some studies on that. The hard beat, rapid tempo needs to be avoided. That's been learned. Okay, the little girl in the red back there had a question. She what? I can't hear. I can talk to you afterwards if you. Okay. Okay, if you're homeschooling your kids, you need to be in a homeschool group where the kids can get socialized.
Yeah,
You don't want to just have your kid alone by themselves. There's a lot of homeschool things where then they have homeschool events where the kids socialize. It's really important that the kids have that. Yep, after school programs and things where they can do stuff with other children. That's really important. Yep. And I'm seeing too many smart autistic kids graduate from college and not be able to handle the workplace. Like a lawyer with a PhD in law couldn't handle a law office. An English major, magna cum laude, couldn't handle the workplace. That's two, this is just this year I've run into. You see, so we want to be learning the work skills before they graduate. So it's not a sudden transition. And I'd like to ideally start off with the 11-year-olds with paper route substitutes. And they need to be working for somebody on a schedule outside the family. Somebody outside the family is the boss. You know, it could be the minister at the church. It could be Mr. Jones's dog they walk. And they got to walk it the way where Mr. Jones wants it walked. Okay? Well, maybe that, okay, right there.
Do you have an opinion about inclusive programs for kids on the spectrum? So classrooms, kids on the spectrum being in regular integrated classrooms or self-contained specialized programs?
Well, I want to see the fully verbal kids in the regular classroom if possible and doing a lot of things with the other kids. And then there's some individuals that probably may have to be in a self-contained classroom. What I want to see is progress. I'll tell you something I don't want to see. I see a 12-year-old, fully verbal, just in a class with a whole bunch of nonverbal kids that are not being taught typing, and he's going nowhere. That I don't want to see. Because there's too often a tendency to get trapped by the label and think that this kid can't do anything. And then I'd go over to when I was out working in construction, working with shop people that owned businesses that were definitely autistic. See, this is one of the things that educators don't get. Also, that little math kid they're labeling oppositional defiant needs to be moved ahead so that we stay ahead in making computer chips. There's a connection here. There's a connection. We need his skills. I don't think labeling them pathological demand disorder is a very good thing to be doing when all I have to do is take some high school math books and bring them in and he can look at them on his desk. They're free if you look around. And I want the old-fashioned algebra books, not the weird verbal algebra they're doing now. That's what I want. And he's going to take off with those books. Take the price of free. Get them out of the attic somewhere. You see, I just see that. Don't give me a reason why you can't do it. Because it's a BS reason. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. And it's been great to be here and talk to everybody. Thank you for coming. Okay.